Our next session is Championing Others' Rights and Their Own, Conversations between Saurabh Kirpal and Jayna Kothari. Before I hand over to the both of you, and I'm sure you'll have a lot to ask each other, let me quickly introduce you. Saurabh Kirpal, after studying physics at St. Stephen's College in Delhi, read law at the University of Oxford and did his master's in law at the University of Cambridge. He did a brief stint working with the United Nations in Geneva before returning to Delhi, where he has been practicing at the Supreme Court for well over 2 decades. He has appeared in a range of matters covering a diverse range of subjects from commercial to constitutional law. He is presently fighting the case seeking recognition of same-sex marriage before the Delhi High Court. A self-described accidental activist, he is also a trustee of the NAS Foundation, the NGO that first fought for decriminalization of homosexuality in India. He is the author of the recently released book, Sex and the Supreme Court, an anthology about issues relating to law, gender, and sexuality. Jayna is a senior advocate and practices in the Supreme Court of India. She is also executive director of the Center for Law and Policy Research. She graduated from University Law College with a BA LLB degree and received the BCL degree from University of Oxford. Jayna was a Wrangler DC Pewaite Fellow at the University of Cambridge. Jayna's research and practice interests include constitutional law, gender and sexuality law, disability rights, and decriminalization law. She had argued in the Supreme Court in the recent constitutional challenges to Section 377 of the IPC. She also argued the independent thought case in which the Supreme Court recognized child marital rape as a criminal offense. Her book, The Future of Disability Law in India, was published in 2012 by Oxford University Press. The floor is yours. I would love for the both of you to take over.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yes. And, Jayna, let me just jump in and straight away, I've been dying to ask so many questions of you. You're quite the powerhouse, I must say, and I've really been a fan of your work from the time I saw you arguing the 377 matter as well. I didn't really know you before, but it's a pleasure to get to know you thereafter. And I know you're a senior counsel of great eminence. And that's what I want to start off with, actually, Jayna, is that, you've accomplished a fair bit in your life. You are a senior counsel. But tell me one thing, is there at some level in our profession of law, some amount of pigeonholing that happens? You run the Center for Policy Research, you're doing disability law. Those are what I call social causes. Do you find often that women are put in a category where they end up doing these kind of matters, and the regular meaty commercial where the money is and where the big fight the Supreme Court are, that seems to somehow be an area where women have not made their mark as much as in other areas? Is that true? Is my understanding true? And what do you think, if it is, the reason for that?
Thanks, Saurabh, and great to really chat with you today. We've seen each other in the 377 case, but we didn't really get a chance to interact. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I have a lot of questions in my head too to ask you. But yeah, thanks for this. I think it's a very pertinent question. Do women end up getting pigeonholed? I think women lawyers sometimes do end up getting pigeonholed, and the usual kind of legal issues, they are kind of sent, and cases, given our family law, just because you're a woman, you're supposed to be doing family law, and not so much human rights or social causes. I feel perhaps it's because it's a little more visible now, and but what you said is a little bit right, in the sense, if a very successful male lawyer, like a male senior advocate, would take up one or two PILs, then it is seen that, oh, he's such a well-rounded kind of lawyer. But when women take up a lot of PILs or human rights or social causes, they do end up getting stereotyped, and this one just does PIL work, so she's perhaps not a very serious lawyer. It's hard So a little bit of that stereotyping does happen. But I think, there are a lot of women who do different areas of very meaty, regular, hardcore, fields of litigation. I mean, you have criminal lawyers, like you have Rebecca John, Nitya, and all of them. I mean, they are such well-known criminal counsels. You have women doing commercial law, but I think they are few, so we don't see too many of them. And I think also, like especially in commercial litigation, I think there are also these boys' cliques. The firms send the cases to their friends who are counsels who are men, and so there is a little bit of a boys' club. So it's hard for women to also break through. But there have been, there are women counsels doing very successfully in these fields, but yeah, there are fewer, and we have to really kind of open up those fields.
Indu, I was thinking of straight away. Indu Malhotra was the last arbitration expert. She became a judge, of course.
Exactly. And she had a very big commercial practice where she was really successful. And she, Justice Ruma Pal, I mean, she showed her kind of strengths in commercial judgments. So, we do have many of them. But let me ask you a question. We could, since you put me on the spot. Yeah. So, what is, you have a really big practice in the Delhi bar. You've just been designated senior counsel, so congrats for that. And you took a lead role in the NAS judgment. And I think what I find really brave is that you've come out quite openly about yourself as being gay in the bar. And we know how conservative and traditional the legal profession is. That must have been quite hard. And what were some of the challenges in that?
I think that is a kind of a nice segue to my question to you, is that while it may be hard to be openly a queer lawyer in the profession, but because our profession is so gendered, and as you mentioned, the old boys network, and I was in the right spot to take full advantage of my privilege, right? I'm an upper caste man. I have the right surname. I come from a well-established legal family. I had this kind of a protective Teflon coating around me. So I could afford really to be a queer lawyer because I knew that no matter what, there'll be enough people who'll take care of me, right? Now, that's not an advantage everybody has. And that's part of the problem with the legal fraternity, I think, is that unless you have someone who puts their hand over your head and guides you as your mentor, it's difficult to get ahead. I think that's certainly clearly the case. For me, I had that. I had people who were looking out for me. And I recognize that I come from a place of immense privilege. So I felt, Jayna, actually, that when I had that privilege, I could either feel exploited and feel nothing about it, or feel guilty about it and sulk and be unhappy, or I could use that privilege and try to help those who didn't have all that I did have, right? So you asked me whether it was difficult to be a queer lawyer. No, it wasn't, because when I appeared before the judges, a large number of them knew me as who I was already. So they didn't react to me in any manner other than just another lawyer. And that's what I felt is important, is that these young people who are joining the bar now, I find they are trying to make a mark for themselves. They're trying to break through these barriers, and it's tough for them. So unless the people like you or me who have made the first move with whatever advantages we have had, unless we start laying down the path for them, things will not improve. So yes, at some level, of course, it was always a risk when I came out. And I say I have the privilege, but the privilege will only go that far. And it's no guarantee that you will have complete protection, because there have been many cases of people who have come from very worthy backgrounds and completely tanked as lawyers. Maybe they were incompetent or whatever else, I don't know. So there's no guarantee. So yes, it was a risk, But I think in my case, it was a calculated risk. And secondly, it was a calculated risk which my conscience propelled me towards, really. I felt this is something that I have to do for the others. And, when you are in a bar, you have three categories of people you interact with. The judges, the other members of your bar, and finally, of course, clients. And this is kind of a thought that I'm going to lead on, and I'm going to ask you the question of what you think about this. Is that when I came out and I said I was part of the old boys clique already, that meant I knew people from the bar and the bench. So they knew me, so it was all right. The one imponderable in all of this was the clients. I was not too sure how they would react to a queer lawyer. Would they feel uncomfortable when they come to brief me? And it's true that you said earlier, in answer to my earlier question, that there's a bit of an old boys network and law firms will brief other lawyers they know. That's true, but if the client says no, ultimately the client's the boss, right? So in my case, the biggest imponderable was would the clients come and support me? And, I've been very lucky. I never felt any issue as far as that is concerned, partly because my practice is commercial litigation. I do a lot of commercial work. And in the commercial world, I think the top companies don't really care about sexuality as much as someone else. Having said that, even the smaller clients who came to me, I didn't get the feeling were ever bothered about my sexuality. If I could deliver in court, that was the only metric that I think seemed to matter to them. But this is another thing I wonder about. How is it for women? I made this tripartite distinction. How do you think judges react and the bar reacts and the react to when you have a woman? When I've heard a lot of my female friends complain about this, the clients just react in a very different way. What has your experience been like on this front?
My experience has actually been quite positive. Actually, the most positive has been with clients, and ultimately, clients are just happy if you deliver. There was initially, when I just started out my practice, that clients would talk to me on the phone and then come and meet me, and they would be a little shocked. I could see the shock on their face because they knew I'm a woman, but they didn't know how young I was or how young I looked. And so they would be a little taken aback, but that was just momentarily, As the minute they know that you're thorough with their work and with their case, the trust develops. And they see you delivering, they see you doing, standing up for them in court. And that's, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. So I've really been very lucky with not having any issues with clients from day one, actually. In the bar, initially, it was a bit tough. I think in the bar, of course, gender plays a role, but I think more than even gender, it's age that plays a role. I felt that in my younger days, just being a young rookie lawyer was a disadvantage, whether you're male or female. And, so you really had to push yourself out. Other lawyers would try, and senior lawyers would kind of kind of take up space and not let you speak. Some of the judges may be a little patronizing, but not all. I think judges are also looking out for youngsters to, really do their case well, and they're happy if they do. So initially it did take some time, but it was, I would have the court officers say, madam, go get your senior. And I would say well, I have no senior, So initially, so I think that was fine. And so to some extent, you need the gray hair, and it's harder, I think, for women to kind of, it is, if you don't look older, it's a bit tough. But just kind of moving, continuing a little bit, I was thinking, from your previous question, that you felt that you felt that you did have to, come out. Did you? I think that must have been quite inspiring for younger members of the bar. And do you think that kind of gave allowed a lot of younger members to be open about themselves in whatever way. Do you think that inspired a few younger people?
I think it did, but it was never my intention, Jayna. I think I had a compelling need to come out and do the 377 case and, as I said, be the accidental activist that I am today, which I never intended or set out to be it. But I just found these causes calling out to me. And that's why I started doing them. As a gay person, when the 2013 Kaushal judgment came, I was personally offended that the Supreme Court of India, where you and I practice, walk down the corridors of the court every day, doesn't even have it in its heart to allow me to have the freedom of sleeping with the person I sleep with in the privacy of my own bedroom, and that they will potentially send me, who appears before them, to jail. So I really felt offended about it, and it was a visceral, deep anger on my part that first made me get involved with the movement. But then, yes, you're right. As time passed, and I notice this increasingly, is that there is somewhat of a mentorship role that develops, right? A lot of young queer members reach out to me, either in the closet, then secretly through messages or whatever else, and I try to speak to as many as I can. And I think that's very important. I think the problem in our country, especially, is the absence of role models.
Yeah.
That is tied really with the absence of discussion on the issue of sexuality. It's a taboo subject. No one talked about it, at least till 377 judgment. I think there were only quiet sniggers when we mentioned the word gay or lesbian, because there were caricatures, there were stereotypes. It was funny, but it was still something taboo under the carpet. And I think the 377 judgment has done that, which is to bring a topic of sexuality out of the closet, not just the people.
Yeah.
So in that, I felt that people have now got increasing courage to at least reach out to me. Whereas I saw that even till the 377 verdict had come, there were a few people who were queer. They may have reached out, but there wasn't that much they didn't even make that effort to come and speak to me or to the two other people who were openly gay at that point of time in the courts. And there were not very many of us. There's still not very many of us queer people out in court. But there is a whole groundswell of people. I think the youth of the country is qualitatively different from what we were. We were slightly scared. We were slightly nervous. I think the youth are impatient, and they're willing to fight for their rights in a way that a lot of people in my generation were not. And I think some part of that is, I do hope, is that they look up to mentors and to role models. So we have to do that for them. We have to be out there. And I suppose it's the same for women. I really, and that's maybe your best place to answer, is that, do you think there are sufficient role models as women? And how about taking a specific example? The fact that there is only one Supreme Court judge who's a female in the Supreme Court today. How does that work to the younger bar? How does it translate into their feeling about their role in, and I'm talking about women here, the women in the bar, as to does it make an impact, saying that this is a constitutional court of my country and you can't even have more than 1 out of 34 as women? How does that impact, you think, women?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. You need role models, and if women lawyers are aspiring to be judges, they need to see women judges. They need to see their high courts and Supreme Court kind of filled with women judges to say that yes, that can be something I can reach to, and that's a possibility. But if you just see 1 or 2 women judges in the Supreme Court and just 3 or 4 women judges or 4 or 5 in the High Court, then it is very daunting, because you feel that you have to be, you have to have all kinds of impossible requirements to make it. You'll never make it. So let me not even aspire to it, and the same is, in other roles as well. Today you don't have that many advocate generals who are women, solicitor generals who are women. You're just having now, I think, one or two in the Supreme Court, but we've never had an AG or SG who's a woman. And in the high courts as well. And, these are positions that all lawyers, especially, including women lawyers, should aspire to. But we need role models there, and if you don't see enough role models, you feel a lot of women aspirants can feel, well, what's the point of trying so hard? They'll never select me, because they don't select women. Right. So yeah, role models, the more you see, Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, I'm sure you know that, when someone asked her, how many judges on the Supreme Court do you need to feel really happy? And she said, nine women, so we are not even halfway.
And not just the judiciary, I suppose, even in Parliament, and it's the absence of representation. But it ends up being tokenism. But do you think it's still at least a good idea to have tokenism as opposed to nothing?
I totally agree. I think we still need, I wouldn't call it tokenism, but, some inclusion, even if it's not full representation, to say that, yes, we do need women. And, some of these things we would raise, at least, when names for elevation or any other positions go up. I think we have to ensure that there are some women there. And it's not to say that you don't have meritorious women to include, it's not that you're including women just for tokenism who are not meritorious. Right. I think we have, we have a vibrant legal community where you have, no shortage of really qualified, meritorious women. And so I think, it has to start somewhere.
Yeah. But it's true. But, I feel, I'm sorry, I'm just asking this question. I'm really curious about your perspective on it. Is that while there are a lot of women at the entry level, there's just a glass ceiling that they seem to hit at some point of time. Yeah. There's such few senior, you talked of no attorney general or solicitor general. There are such few senior counsels as well in various courts. Why do you think is that? Of course, everything is gendered, right? So law is just another profession as well. But I think the law is peculiar in as much as the entry level, there's so many women who are so qualified and brilliant. What happens?
Yeah. We had the experience, now just responding to your senior counsel question, and you went through that because now there are new rules, right? You have an application process. Before this, it was even more harder, right? Because it's all kind of an unsaid, non-transparent way of making senior counsel. But now there's a transparent process. But the glass ceiling is there. So unless you see role models, like, let me just give you the Karnataka example. Karnataka, before this round, had just one woman senior counsel. Just one. And with this, with the round recently in 2018, there were 3 senior counsels who were women, who were designated. But, at that time, we were talking, we had very few women applying. And that's, that answers your question. We were actually, me and a couple of other women lawyers were like, why aren't more women applying? Because we certainly did feel that there were many more women who, had they applied, stood a very good chance. And a lot of them didn't apply because they assumed that they wouldn't get selected. They assumed that they wouldn't select women, that they felt that the burdens or standards for them would be much higher or tougher, and a lot of men would just kind of breeze through. And also were afraid that what if we don't make it, how would it affect our profession then? But, a lot of these things, it's like from school, right? A lot of boys are just so confident that they will just answer and open their mouth in class, even if they don't know the answer. And girls are still so hesitant. I have to know the right answer. So we have to break some of these myths and barriers for the gates to open. I mean, we have to open the gates. Uh, you know. So okay, let me quiz you a bit. What has I mean? You spoke about the the Navtej case, and obviously it was something personally very important. But what was your experience? I mean, it was such a historic moment, wasn't it? The whole litigation. I mean, I was part of it, but what was your experience of the litigation before, after, whatever? What stood out? And
Well, I can't answer that question too well because then people won't go out and buy my book.
yeah,
Let me shamelessly plug it and say, like, if you want a more detailed answer, kindly purchase the book.
but a
Uh,
teaser.
a little teaser I can certainly give you. Uh, it was a roller coaster, Jayna. Really, it really was a roller coaster. I told you I was so angry when the judgment had come, but then I went through those whole 5 stages of grief, which I don't have to reiterate here. But I, when we decided to file that petition for Navtej Johar, we never thought that it would be the lead petition and be decided. Our idea always was that we'll file this writ petition to cure a particular lacuna, legal lacuna, that exists in the curative petitions in the NAS Foundation. Now, I realize that a large amount of our audience is not legally literate. Let me just give a 1-minute background as to what had happened is that when the Supreme Court decided against decriminalization, a curative petition had been filed, which allowed the court a legal tool to relook at its own judgment. But the grounds on which it could relook were very limited. It had to be, for instance, that they did not hear one of the parties, or it was so wrong that no one could possibly have taken such a decision. Now, those were very tenuous legal grounds, and we were a bit nervous. So that's why Navtej's case was filed as a supplement. But come January of 2018, I was speaking to Menika, and suddenly, because we were doing this case together, the Chief Justice, then Justice Mishra, just decided to list this particular matter out of turn in his court. And we were very nervous because we didn't know why has this matter been picked out and put for hearing, because it had been tagged with the curative petitions. It was meant to be heard with the curatives. But this was picked out and heard. So we didn't really know what the intention of the court was. And then, of course, he referred the matter to a bench of 5 judges after the first hearing. And that was shortly before the summer break. That matter was going to 5 judges. And then in the summer break, we figured out that it was going to be a bench of 5 judges. And the moment we heard the constitution of the bench of 5 judges, I think most of us knew we'd won the case. There was Chief Justice Mishra, whose political ideology one didn't really know, but he obviously thought this was a case important enough to be heard by the Supreme Court on a priority basis, because there were a large number of constitution bench matters which were pending, which had not been listed, but this one was. Then there was Justice Khanwelkar, Justice Chandrachud, Justice Nariman, and Justice Malhotra, all 4 of them from metro cities, all of them very liberal judges, all with great practices, and we all knew they were fairly sympathetic, publicly and privately, I must confess, that they were sympathetic to the cause of the LGBTQIA community. So there was a fair bit of optimism going into the hearings. But, as you know more better than anyone else, that nothing is final in court till the verdict actually comes. One of the problems we had was how was the government going to react? Because all this while the government had not filed its reply to the petition. We did not know what stand it would take. Until the last moment, the government sought adjournments, saying that give us time, give us time, give us time. We want to file a reply. And Chief Justice Mishra stood firm and said, no, I'm not going to give you time. And then we argued our matter. You'd argue the matter. We all argued. I argued some bit of it. The hearing seemed to go really brilliantly. And then when the government's turn came, that's when they filed the affidavit, if you recollect. And luckily, and I can't tell you about the backroom shenanigans, some part of which I know, which we'll do a Charcha over something better than chai, maybe over something more sparkly and bubbly once, Jayna, you and I'll tell you. So the government came out with this affidavit, which was at the least neutral. And, that was the most I could hope in the government, and that was fine. And once the verdict was over, I think the writing was on the wall. But still, nothing can explain the joy and the happiness I felt on the day the verdict came. Personally, I'd had a bit of a shocker the day before when my own name had been deferred one day before, but I knew that was happening. But in spite of that, the absolute sense of freedom that I felt the day the judgment came, I felt like shouting from the rooftops. As I think not only the queer community, but every right-thinking person. I mean, you, for instance, great ally. I think there is in our country a decent streak of humanity, tolerance. Sometimes we see so many dark clouds, Jayna, that we think that there is only evil that is left behind, that there's only horrible things left. And that's just so not true. There's a lot of joy and there are a lot of good people in our country. And I'd say the vast majority, forget how anyone votes, the vast majority of our country are a decent lot of people. I have faith in the humanity of our country. And I saw the best example of that was the 377 judgment. Had we been an intolerant, homophobic society, we would have seen demonstrations on the road. We would have seen some kind of agitation against the judgment. But
there was only celebration, right? And there was only celebration.
Yes, absolutely.
There was only celebration. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was so much happiness. And that's probably what's caused, I think, this outpouring also of sense of confidence in the young people. That they feel today that the Supreme Court of India has got my back. And if the Supreme Court can say this is all right, then maybe it is. So, people in big cities may not need this. But I think someone in a small town, a Mufassil town, or in a village somewhere, once they read about this judgment, I don't know, very many people probably would not have read the text of the judgment. And that's another problem we have, is our judgments are written in such turgid language that it's inaccessible. I mean, you read a US Supreme Court judgment, any person can read it, any lay person. But we don't have that. That's our style of legal writing. But in any case, they must have read the short part of it in newspapers. And that completely gave them the courage to come out and celebrate. But, you were also in this case, Jayna. So what was your experience in it? What brought you into this case? I'd like to hear your perspective on it, because mine is very clearly personal. I'd like to see yours.
Yeah. So I represented 3 trans activists in the case. And, we kind of got into the case in 2016, very soon after the Nalsa judgment. Just again for the audience, in 2014, the Supreme Court laid down quite a landmark judgment recognizing the right to gender identity. And that, after that judgment, so I was working quite closely with trans activists, and there was great excitement after this judgment. And then we started thinking, hey, how will this now impact the 377 curative petition? Because now the Supreme Court is actually recognizing the right to gender identity and sexual orientation in a veiled way, but certainly gender identity. And so we were working on filing a new petition, and we did that. And it was, I think one of the reasons was certainly the Nalsa decision, but another reason was also that I think the trans community felt that they needed a voice, a clear voice in this fight, because they were for too long just at the back end, just part of the LGBTQI, and it was not really them and their stories which were out, so then we filed this petition, and then it was tagged, with the curative, and it all happened quite coincidentally, because I think you guys were working on the petition, and we were working on it, and our petition was actually listed very, just a few days after yours, and it was all kind of all happening in different parts of the country at the same time. But yeah, when the case was listed for hearing, I think everyone was surprised because it was taken out of turn. I remember kind of rushing to Delhi. Now even going to Delhi seems like normal, but we rushed to Delhi, And two of the petitioners, I was representing three of them, two of the petitioners came along too. They had difficulty getting through the Supreme Court despite the AOR having passes made for them at the gate. They were waiting at the gate and messaging me that, people are staring at us because they're obviously trans, and they're like, we're not allowed in. Finally, they got in. So you kind of see how, they were there to hear their case, and they constantly were faced with the same discrimination and stigma that we were actually fighting about. They got in, and they were there to hear the arguments. And then, there was just so much excitement, I think, which was palpable in the court, right? With so many, lawyers, students, journalists, petitioners. It was like a mela in some way. And then after the case, when the verdict came, it was, I was in Bangalore. You guys were all in Delhi. And then when the verdict came, I was on my way back in the afternoon from court, and there were parties, on the streets. And, Akai called and said, you have to come to the town hall. And then, we have a town hall, and we went there, and there were, media, there was media coverage everywhere. There was the flag, the rainbow flag, and people were screaming and shouting. And I still remember Akai kind of saying to one of the journalists that today is our Independence Day. Today is our independence, really.
Pick up on that, and you said it was an Independence Day really for the queer community, the way it was Independence Day for women in India in 1950, theoretically. But 75 years down the line, I really wonder how much has changed for women. And equally, 2 years down the line, I really wonder how much has changed for the trans community in particular. I think because if you have a caste system in the queer community, the outcast would still be the trans community. I think that double whammy there. It really is a.
Yeah, I think there have been, I think the judgment has brought in a lot. The recognition and the, openness to talk about these issues. Of course, we have a long way to go. And I feel even, of course, the trans community is working on many of these issues. I don't think even for other members of the queer community, it's been a bed of roses. But I think the judgment has paved the way, at least, for us to kind of fight on. And I think the larger message really, the larger impact is to women too, to say that you can be what you want to be. Isn't that really the message? And how do we kind of put that in our practice as lawyers, as members of the legal profession?
True. Because sometimes I think we're talking about gender, but we become so binary that we do forget. And I think it just comes naturally to people to talk of gender in the binary, and we forget the whole trans community. And I think that's something we should be aware of. And only then can we actually start to address that problem.
Yeah. And also address larger other intersections as well. Intersections within the LGBTI community of trans and intersex persons, but other intersections of caste, religion, class, and other minorities. So, yeah, I think that is the bigger battle, Yeah.
We have Sirat there again.
I feel quite guilty about stopping the both of you, but this was a truly fascinating conversation, and I got goosebumps, Jayna, when you were mentioning how Dr. Karisai said it's Independence Day for the community. And Saurabh, we hope you told us the backroom shenanigans, and we're not invited to the champagne, it seems, but thank you so very much, both of you, for the conversation. We unfortunately need to get to our next session.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next session is grassroots change. We have leaders from civil society organizations. We'll be back soon with Sohini Bhattacharya and Shraddha Joshi in a bit. So please do stay put.
So Jayna, I'll tell you another time the full backroom shenanigans.
We have to catch up. Lovely chatting with you, Saurabh.
Lovely was. It really was.
Thanks. Bye.